Alright everybody, we're doing a little bit different video here today. We're inside the house. It's freezing outside with some snow, so I just thought I'd put this thing together here, this little video, to show you what I've got going here with this Axial scx10 Pro mashup rig. Take the top off. I got the Pro chassis with a Chinese internet 3-gear dig transmission with the Rhino crawler Capra axles, which are the Vanquish F9 clones. I am running the Radio Link RC4 radio, and let's see here. I just put some hair ties, did some bands, suspension bands here to keep the suspension from unloading on super steep climbs, front and rear. I will ignore the puzzle in the background. GTS, is that the Traxxas shocks? Traxxas shocks up front, elements in the rear, flipped elements because they leak. Element shocks leak terribly. Kit shocks or the factory shocks, either of them, they leak terribly right there. So anyway, those are flipped. But that's not the focus of this video. It is this, the focus of this video is this, this rear axle, which is a front axle, and I've got a couple Rhino crawler parts here for the rear steer. And to set this thing up, I had to chop this chassis, and I just sort of did a quick chop job on it to get these things to clear. But this rear steer setup is specific to this Vanquish clone axle, so very tight clearance there on this link riser in the back, but you can see where I've had to cut this axial chassis, so I needed to do that to get this rear steer set up. And you might just be wondering why I didn't use the conventional servo-on axle, and there's probably a couple of reasons. Number one, the main reason is I bought the parts for this so I could use it like this versus the other way. The second is, if you all know the Capra axles, the way the upper links mount, they mount kind of wide, and you can see that up here in the front, which if you're running these axles on a Capra chassis, that's great because that chassis and the link mounts triangulate the links a little bit better. But if you're running an actual flat rail or running these axles on another different chassis, it creates less triangulation. So I wanted to triangulate the rear end a little bit more, for a little bit more, like, just gives you a little more control in the way the axle works. So those are the main reasons. And the third one would be just that little bit of mass centralization that happens by moving this servo down lower on the axle and back a hair. So you know, there's a balance benefit to it all. I would have rather not cut the chassis rail out, but as you can see here, and if you're familiar with the Pro chassis where this all connects in the rear, there was interference with this servo under full suspension compression, so I felt like it was a sacrifice These chassis are relatively inexpensive. I think it's like 35-40 bucks through Axial, but you can get them for like nickels on the Chinese internet, so I just did it like that. So I'm going to demonstrate my dig function here. And I'm running a Spectrum, a corny Spectrum, you know, just a super flimsy plastic geared wimpy servo for the dig, because it really doesn't need a lot of torque. So also the Fusion, Hobbying Fusion SE there, so that's cool. And the Flash Hobby 60 kg direct power servo up front, which is pretty handy servo. The rear servo is a 45 kg Chinese internet servo, which is a pretty good servo. It's running off of the 7.4 volt BEC from the Fusion. And my rear steer is set up here on this variable rate knob on the RC4 GS Radio Link radio, so that's pretty handy. In a thumb steer position, I'm not a thumb steer guy on this wheel, plus this radio does not allow for that in the most like practical way, but this is set up pretty handy. You can see that rubber wheel on there is an actual Lego tire, which kind of facilitates the turning function, which is pretty handy. So that's cool. There's a little bit more it's pretty angled, this steering here. You know, the what do you call that? I don't know what that's called, but it's quite a bit of why can't I think of that now? Anyway, this is the setup. So I haven't had a chance to go out and actually run. Oh, almost dropped that. Boy. Haven't had a chance to get out and run it, but I will. Back of the chassis isn't like looking as great as it could, but I'm not too concerned with that. Cutting it, I think that it's plenty rigid. It's a pretty stiff chassis anyway, so we should be in good shape. So pretty happy with those Rhino crawler parts from AliExpress. Yeah, that rear servo is pretty good back there. It's going to make this thing a little bit funner to drive. I do have some steel weights from Trio, steel hard wood, heavy iron beadlock rings, which are pretty heavy. They're putting some weight on these landmines. You can see they're squatted pretty good, but that should give us some good traction. So anyway, that's how it goes. Thanks for watching.